Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we have an exclusive interview with the Auditor General of the state of Pennsylvania. We're going to talk about his State of the Child Report and gun safety. But first, I hope you're seated for this one. Junkets for Justice. You have to stay around. We'll be back in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, before we get to the Auditor General of the state, we're going to. I'm checking in with Brad Bumsted and Paula Knudsen. Brad is the executive editor of the Caucus, and Paula is
bureau chief.
It
like
says
the promotion,
executive editor. Now he says bureau chief. That's not what it said on the rundown here. And he's the and she's the investigative reporter. We'll forget all that. They're from the Caucus.
That's fine.
Thanks. I think I did that once before to you.
It's fine. You promote me every time I'm here, right?
I'm promoting him. There you go. All right. I don't even know how to start this, Brad. Junkets for Justice?
Yeah.
You got to explain this.
Well, it's just one of the many stories that we've laid out there. Now, first, let me preface it by saying that the Caucus is a print-only publication that comes out once a week that focuses on investigative reporting and does deep dives on state issues. That's owned by LNP Media Group. And I'm fortunate to work there with someone as good as Paula, who's an excellent investigative reporter, and we have a reporter in Pittsburgh as well. So let Paula tell you about Junkets for Justice.
I'm holding it up. I'm holding up all these folks. These folks seem to have gotten in some trouble with the law, but I'll skip that for
They didn't get
moment.
any junkets, except some of them, the prison.
All right, what's the Junkets about?
Well, I'll hold this one up and get a shot of that.
We got it.
Junkets for Justice. As Brad mentioned, we write about state government and state officials, and this piece was about the appellate court judges. So we wanted to look into their statements of financial interest to see what kind of gifts they were getting. And unlike the legislators, you just held up that where you can go on to the State Ethics Commission, click on every legislator's statement of financial interest.
Yeah.
You can't do that with these.
No.
There's an entirely separate process where you have to contact.
Now, let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
We're talking about the judges who serve on the Commonwealth, Superior, and the justices on the Supreme Court. The three appellate courts in the state of Pennsylvania. Go ahead.
That's right. So we wanted to find out what are they reporting in their outside interests? Are they getting gifts? Things like that. So it's a much different process. You cannot get them instantly online. You must request them. So
what do they do?
What do? They go on trips. We found a lot of them went on trips. They reported between all three of those courts that you mentioned, $42,000 in gifts over the course of 2 years. So it's a pretty significant amount of money.
Well,
the Bar Association events are typically in the Caribbean. Early in January or February, and
so they go and they're usually sometimes they're speakers.
They are speakers, but these are events paid for in effect by lawyers. Many of whom may appear the Bar Association. Now the justices and judges will say that's different with the Bar Association. It's not one lawyer per se. It's a group.
It's their professional.
However, there are lots of other gifts of travel and sporting events and things that come from individual lawyers that go to justices.
And the Bar Association, let's be candid, they do some good stuff. They produce this, and when the candidates run for office, they meet with them, they interview them, they put out a recommended. They go through a whole process. But is your problem that there's no transparency? I mean, if they're reported, then everybody can see and know that's not illegal, right?
But you can't find them. The average person couldn't just go on and look them up. It took her 2 months, pretty much, to get them.
It took a while, but when we talked to people about are there problems with the system, we talked to a law professor from Pittsburgh who said, yeah, there's some serious problems with judges accepting gifts, particularly when those gifts are from lawyers or law firms that may appear in front of them.
Well, let's stop right here. I've talked about this and written about it, and I think over the years, Brad, you have too. I don't know if you have, Paula, but one of the problems with electing judges in this state is a disproportionate amount of money does come from people who have some interest in what goes on in those courts.
No question about it. And then on top of that, you have a small segment of lawyers also giving gifts to certain judges, paying for their tickets to a Pirates game or a Phillies game or
and let's be honest,
games.
again, it's not illegal. We're not talking about the fact that they're reporting it. So what your argument is that the reporting of it ought to be more transparent. Is that what
That's one of the issues. Then we were participating in some of the debates as media panelists, and I asked all of the Commonwealth Court candidates, would you accept gifts? Each one of them said no.
And David Thornburg, the son of the former governor, was the moderator in the panel that I did for Superior Court, and I asked that question about
Committee
gifts.
of 70.
And every single candidate who was there said no, they would not take gifts. Thornburg called it a shutout.
A shutout, okay.
And so one of the things, just topical, some of these judges are accepting from lawyers tickets to go to Pennsylvania Society. So we're talking about some glitzy events, trips to St. Martin, the tropical islands.
Okay. All right, we're going to talk about an unprecedented number of people say they're running for lieutenant governor in the second term. When a governor is up for a second term, as Governor Wolf is, we're going to chat about that. Pretty unprecedented.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. We're talking with folks from the caucus. They do investigative reporting and in an unprecedented way, Brad Bumsted. The governor of the state, Tom Wolf, has, I'll be modest about this, no relationship at all, an understatement rather, with the lieutenant governor of the state of Pennsylvania, Michael Stack. As a result of that, I think largely we now have 5 people plus the current lieutenant governor who say they're going to run.
That's part of the reason, but he had no relationship with him, and more importantly, he didn't pick him. It doesn't work that way in this state. You don't get to pick a running mate like the
But you
president
can run
does.
with somebody even though you're in separate
You can, and
ballots.
other governors have done that. But Lieutenant Governor Stack won, I believe, because he was the only candidate from Philadelphia, and everybody else was from around the rest of the state. But what happened this year, it was a stunning revelation, if I have to say so, by the caucus and ABC 27. We jointly broke that story that Governor Tom Wolf had ordered an investigation of Stack and his wife's alleged mistreatment of employees at the mansion. That's this mansion where the lieutenant governor stays in Indiantown Gap, and his security detail. And the lieutenant governor held a press conference where he apologized, but never really said what he was apologizing for. He wouldn't detail any of it. And then, more amazingly, a week after that, Governor Wolf yanked the security detail away. The state police troopers who guard the lieutenant governor, he just took them back.
Yeah, and some of the people who are running are saying they wouldn't live in, quote, the mansion, the lieutenant governor's residence in Indiantown Gap. And I mean, it's really interesting. Governors have had different relationships with their lieutenant governor throughout history. It's not, unusual that sometimes they're not on the same page. I'll just put it that way. But this break is so clear and so almost formal. And we've heard nothing from Governor Wolf about whether he likes one of the other candidates who are running or whether he's going to pick his own, have we? We haven't heard anything.
We haven't heard anything. This week, Representative Madeline Dean issued a press release saying she was in and that she would be running. We interviewed her a couple weeks ago. She said she talked to Governor Wolf, but she didn't want to share the content of that conversation.
Right. Representative Dean and Mr. Fetterman, who'd run in the U.S. Senate.
John Fetterman, he's the mayor of Braddock. He's run for the Senate.
Are two people who, are believed to have a pretty significant shot at knocking off Stack, although Stack has considerable support in Philadelphia and could still win.
Important.
It is important. But what happened after this Inspector General's report is we did a series of reports detailing the financial aspects of Lieutenant Governor, how he'd spent $70,000 on grocery bills and food and other sort of expenses for the Lieutenant Governor's office, $30,000, almost all of it, at one Giant and a couple deli stores for gourmet type foods, prime cuts of meat, lump crab meat, all these sorts of things, and he was, we know that they entertain at this mansion, but he was doing some serious entertaining.
Serious stuff. All right. Well, look, I want to thank both of you for coming in and providing us with this update. The State of the Child Report and gun safety, two of the issues we're going to get into with the Pennsylvania's Auditor General, Eugene DePasquale, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Well, we're delighted to have the Auditor General of the state, Eugene DePasquale. He's been on the program many times. He's from York, Pennsylvania. York is one of 67 counties. They own the state. He laughs when I say that the governor of the Commonwealth, Tom Wolf, is from York. One of the four Republican candidates, Scott Wagner, is from York. If he wins the Republican nomination, we'll have a York, and you're not on the ballot this year. What do you got going on in the White Rose County?
It is a confluence of events. It is, it's an odd quirk, but yes, I did think right now Senator Wagner is probably the favorite for the Republican nomination. Certainly Governor Wolf will be the Democratic nominee, and I'm not going anywhere for at least another 3 years. So you're gonna have to deal with York County for a while.
I know, and you had a governor. George Leader, who did, by the way, there have been Republican governors like Bill Scranton who did a wonderful job, and so George Leader did as well. So we're not being partisan about this. We've had good Democratic and Republican governors.
He really was the first one that professionalized the state government. He turned it from basically a political hack situation when you won the election to professionalizing state services.
All right, you conducted, I think, a year-long study called State of the Child. This is a huge 80-page report that had some stunning findings, and it's important to not just to the kids of this state, but the policies that the legislature engages in, private sector.
That's right.
Give us a quick overview.
So it started when I did an audit of the child abuse hotline, where we found 58,000 unanswered phone calls at the child abuse hotline. That's in Harrisburg, Department of Human Services. That led me to now start auditing county children youth protection offices all over the state. And so that 58,000 was obviously a disaster. But then we got under the hood of these state agencies. We found York County, 90% turnover. In Cambria County, almost half the kids 18 and under are part of the children youth system. And that's because of this opioid epidemic that is exploding all over Pennsylvania. We have pay that is not subsequent with the job that we're asking these young men and women to do. And then when they do it, they're sometimes not trained either emotionally or physically to deal with the challenges of this.
Now, I want to interrupt you. In your report, 46 children died, 79 nearly died from abuse, and this was 1 year that you went back and examined. And you reached some important observations that I think are worth. So when you did this report, you found these appalling situations.
That's right.
What should we do to make it right?
Well, there's two things. Number one, I'm also now traveling around the state to try to get ideas from the actual caseworkers. I believe we have to put together a Marshall Plan in Pennsylvania to fix this. I think it's that bad. And we have to tackle, first of all, the opioid crisis, because that's a significant contributor to this. But it's not just about pay for the workers, although I think that's part of it. I think we have to get better coordination with law enforcement. When we ask a young man or woman to go into some of these homes, if you're asking a police officer to go in, they would do it with backup. But we're having young men and women coming out with a bachelor's degree.
We have two. There's something societally wrong.
That's right.
The children are being abused, and then we're asking government to come in and try to figure out what's going on. And then in terms of the people who do that, you found things like 75, 85, 90% turnover in the with the people who are doing, the investigations and trying to find out what's going on in the family.
And here's why the turnover rate is critical and why that has to be fixed. So a young man or young woman who's the caseworker goes in and builds a rapport with a kid and a family, and they're trying to turn it around, and then they leave because of bad pay or the circumstances of the job. Well, in some of those families, you're dealing with some of the most vulnerable kids. To get them to trust another adult after that turnover, it's almost impossible.
It's horrible. So some of this takes state legislative action,
Absolutely.
I would think.
Some of it is, I think some of it is going to
county,
take,
some
of it will be state legislative action. Some of it will be resources, but some of it is just going to be working with better training of the personnel. Because when you're talking about a young man or a young woman walking into these situations, sometimes you could give them all the skills that they need to confront it, but you've got to be emotionally ready for that as well.
What's your reaction been? I mean, I would think, having read it, I'm looking at it and think, oh my gosh, this is a major crisis, and there's nothing partisan. This is not Democrat or Republican. This is societal.
And it is societal. It is probably near universal when people say we've got to do something. The challenge that I'm going to have to, over the next several months, is what is that something? And what I've told legislators is I want to give them a concrete plan and give the administration a concrete plan, because one of the advantages I have of being the Auditor General, yes, I'm a Democrat and I run for office, but we get to look at things in a very nonpartisan way. And I think I've built up enough relationship with the legislature.
And you've audited, you've audited the books of organizations and parts of government dominated by Republicans and Democrats. I'll say that on the record. Go ahead.
So I think that I've built up enough respect with the legislature that if I walk in and say, here's 4 or 5 things you need to do, I think we can build a lot of support for getting those done.
Last question before we go to a break and get into gun safety issues. All right. Are you optimistic? What's the reaction been?
I am optimistic, but I'm optimistic knowing that it is an incredible challenge. There are some things that government can do, and there are some things government can't do.
I know what you mean, because you're dealing with individuals that get hired at the county level and other services provided by counties and state government.
It will be an enormous challenge, but I know this, that there are too many kids at risk for us not to do everything. And then if someone is watching this and thinking, oh, I don't want my tax dollars going to that, I want to make this very clear. If we don't get this right, your tax dollars are going to go on the back end to incarceration.
All right, when we come back, the Auditor General has also, he's trying to get ideas. He's seeking ideas on gun safety. We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives.
Welcome back. I'm talking with the state's Auditor General, Eugene DePasquale. Now, listen, you've taken a big interest in gun safety, but you're approaching changes that might be made to Pennsylvania law relating to guns in a very interesting way. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, this is one of those things where we've had way too many mass shootings in the United States, and this is not. This is just across the spectrum. Vegas, Texas, et cetera. And I know we can't stop everything, but it was one of those things I said, I don't want to be on my deathbed 50, hopefully 50, 70, 100 years from now, and thinking I had a chance to do something and didn't try. It's the old adage from Governor Casey, what did you do when you had the power?
Right.
And so I am in the process, and my team are in the process of reviewing all of our state laws and regulations to see what is working and what isn't, so that we can find some common sense and common ground on this issue. What happens is too many times you get into the pro-gun or the anti-gun camp, and they don't talk to each other, and I think there are a lot of things that we can do that doesn't put you into one camp or the other to help solve the problem. I think looking at mental health and background checks.
Yeah, that's a great question. If somebody has a serious mental health problem, why would we want them to have a firearm?
And so we're going to look at things that
Who could be against that?
I have yet to find anyone, but that's one of the things that we're going to look at this report is how can we find a way to target an approach that reduces, we're never going to eliminate gun violence, but how do you reduce gun violence in a way that doesn't infringe on people's constitutional Second Amendment rights?
Let me here's one of the problems that I've noticed over the years, that each side looks at each other like with a death wish, because if I talk to you about gun control and you're a gun rights, you're going to say, oh, you want to take my rights away. You want to seize my gun.
That's right.
And then if I'm on the other side and you're a gun rights and a gun control advocate, you say, they don't want to talk about anything.
Right.
They don't want to talk about mental health. They don't want to.
And everybody stays.
Are you finding that a little bit?
Everybody stays in their camp. But when I put this out, I got some pushback on social media, mostly from people on the right, but some on the left. And when I actually took the time to walk them through what I was looking to do, and then some people who, again, you would consider to be very staunch, gun rights. And I said, and they would come back and go, oh, well, I don't have any problem with that. But it took time to work them through, because the initial reaction is Democrat looking at gun laws. And by the way, I understand that. I mean, I may not always agree with it, but I understand that.
You're also from York County.
I get it. And when you run when you run statewide in Pennsylvania, you have to run in urban areas of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, but also we have one of the largest rural populations in the United States. So I've had to deal with this issue.
So where is it? Where is it? Where are you in terms of what you're trying to do?
We're going to come out with this report in the spring, but I'm or maybe later in spring, because we have a lot of work to do. But the thing we are really focused in on is on the mental health, because 60% of gun deaths in Pennsylvania are suicides.
Oh, that's right. That's something that I'm glad you brought that up.
They're suicides
that people aren't aware of.
Right.
Of course, they may find other ways to kill. Kill themselves.
And again, and it's not, any way someone takes their own life is a tragedy. But it's 60%. So we're going to think, okay, what are some of the common denominators there, so that we can try to reduce that number?
All right. So we have about 40 seconds left. What other big audits are you working on?
We are going to be coming out very soon with our audit of the Philadelphia Parking Authority.
Oh my God!
I will.
I won't even speculate.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
All right.
But we'll need more than 40 seconds when that one's done.
When you're going to, hopefully you'll come back, particularly on the gun safety thing. All right. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.